Hey everybody, Chris Jacobs here with the lifting. Back here with Ryan Polenkartz. We're actually doing an episode of the
Hey guys.
lifting today about the Elder Scrolls. This one's about Morrowind, and he's going to talk about a lot of the lore beforehand. And we're going to do the informational comparison, and hopefully have a galactic at the end do a channeling about it. So take it away, Ryan.
Awesome. So Morrowind is the third main series game in the Elder Scrolls series. There were a couple little not open world, very linear based kind of level based video games in between Morrowind and Daggerfall. And it was a big gap between Morrowind and Daggerfall. Daggerfall came out in, I believe, 94, 96, and Morrowind came out in, I believe, 2004. So big gap in the time there, 8 to 10 years. So Morrowind is also the first more casual of the Elder Scrolls games. The other ones were played on very old hardware PCs. They're classic PC games from the 90s. And this one, Morrowind's the first one to come out on conventional home consoles. So the Xbox, the original Xbox, I believe the PS2 had a release for it, as well as the PC obviously had a release for it. Morrowind takes place on the island of Vardenfell, which is an island in the center of the province of Morrowind. So there's mainland Morrowind and there's the island of Vardenfell. The majority of the game of Morrowind takes place on the island of Vardenfell, where the Red Mountain is. It's this really big volcano, and it's very important lore-wise because we'll get into that when I go into the history of the world, which we'll need to understand the story events. But Vardenfell is a relatively big area, and it's just dominated by the Red Mountain volcano. And some of the largest cities on it are Vivec City as well as Zavrin Bay. And they're places where very important events take place, especially in Balmora and Vivec, where you meet very important characters for the plot line. So without further ado, I'm going to go into how, first off, the Elder Scrolls universe came into existence, because it's needed to understand how Vardenfell came into existence.
All right, all right.
Okay, so the Elder Scrolls universe is started with the Void. It's just a vast nothing. And inside the Void, there were two figures, Anu and Padome. Anu created itself a consciousness, essentially, that was more conscious than its primordial essence, essentially. Basically, so it can experience things, sort of how Source did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So did Padme. So Padme's became Sithis, the god of the Dark Brotherhood, one of the factions of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And Anu became Anuiel, and then later changed its name to Ariel. Okay. Which is the elven version of the imperial god Akatosh, and actually the one that likely actually lived on the planet at one point. Okay. So Anu and Padome were constantly in butting heads in the Void, and thus this created the other primordial Et Ada spirits. Most of these are called the Divines, and they also later would become some of the first of the mortal races in the games. But what happened is Sithis / Padome was this is not okay. So it created a being called Lorcan, or Shazar, depending on which group in game you're talking to. They're the same being, essentially. Mm-hmm. So Lorcan / Shazar went to these beings, most of the Et Ada / Elnofe early primordial spirit beings, and Anuel / Ariel, and goes, I have this master plan to create us a great world where we can all live in peace and harmony. Without telling them that to do so would considerably weaken them. And they would not be allowed to leave if they wanted to go in.
Oh, okay.
So, not knowing this, all of these beings were yes, this is a great idea. We'll create this world. We'll have this beautiful place for everyone to live. So they do it. And Lorcan was kind of back there going like, ha ha ha, I've done this. I've tricked them into creating this world. Lorcan didn't actually want to like rule the world or anything, and he wasn't even that like coy about it. He wasn't really like, ha ha ha, I'm evil, but he's not evil. He's kind of just like, he's considered the great trickster by the elves, and he's considered a champion by humanity because they see things differently.
Okay.
So, Lorcan, it quickly becomes apparent, though, in this new world that a lot of these ancient spirits are losing their power, and some of them are losing their life force because they put too much of their power to create the world.
Mm-hmm.
So many of them, led by Magnus, they became what is called the Magna-Gi. The Magna-Gi tore out of this created world when they realized even like the slightest bit of their power was being like set to create it.
Mm-hmm.
So they helped create the world, but then they were like, I'm not staying here to like get caught in the world. So they tore out of the world and they created the sun and the stars. The sun was created by Magnus and the stars were created by all the other ones fleeing with him.
Mm-hmm.
And what in the Elder Scrolls the sun and the stars actually are is they're not actual other planets and solar systems. They're holes to the realm of Aetherius where these Magna-Gi came from originally.
Okay.
Where these primordial spirits originally came from. Not the void itself, but like a pocket between. So there's the void, there's Aetherius, and then there's Mundus. And anytime anyone actually uses magic in the Elder Scrolls, they're actually pulling the energy down from Aetherius through the stars and the sun to do it.
Okay.
So then, shortly after, there were a few spirits, chief among them, Ariel himself, as well as some of the other major eight of the eight divines, like Mara, Dibella, Arche, Zenithar, those beings that are called the eight divines, they were still there. And they had realized they were tricked by Lorcan. So they met at a place called the Adamantine Tower, which is in High Rock. And it's later in history, it's held by an elven group called the Dureni. But at this point, they're the only beings on the entire planet. They live in this tower. And they summoned every one of these spirits that was still alive, essentially, to the Adamantine Tower to decide, how are we going to punish Lorcan for not telling us that this is kind of a death sentence? So Lorcan is summoned there, and the council comes to the decision based mostly on Trinimac and Ariel's decision to rip out his heart, and he's not dead, but they rip out his heart. Well, Ariel is this master archer, and even you actually get his really cool bow later in Skyrim if you play the one DLC, but he takes the heart and he sticks it onto an arrow and he shoots it across Tamriel into this ocean area in Morrowind, in like the center of Morrowind. And the heart sinks down to the bottom of the ocean and creates the Red Mountain, and it's at the heart of the Red Mountain. So it really is the bleeding heart. The volcano is really the bleeding heart of Lorcan. And the Amulet of Kings, which is something important in when we'll talk about Oblivion, is actually made of a piece of the blood of the heart that fell into like a magical like essence collector thing while it was flying over the continent, and like the blood turned into a red crystal when it fused with magic energy.
Okay.
So the world is now in existence, and these beings are like, oh, well, we pretty much can't leave now. Magnus left at the right time, the latest possible second that they could. So when Magnus left, the other ones, the ones that became the eight divines, did get out, though. They got out not by creating a hole to Aetherius. Instead, they created planets around Mundus, which is /Nirn, which is like the mortal planet where all the games have taken place thus far, except for some pocket dimensions that you can visit for very short jaunts. So they make these planets around them. They're seen in the night sky, and it's implied that these planets are them, like they're the consciousness for the planet, as well as the fact that they have physical avatars as well. sort of like in Guardians of the Galaxy, how Ego is the planet, but Ego also has like a body.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So they are off-world now, but a lot of these beings couldn't leave. A lot of these primordial ad Ada beings couldn't leave, and were stuck on Nirn, and they would die, but they inadvertently became the beginning of all mortal peoples: elves, humans, Khajiit, Argonians, the races on other continents like Akavir, the Yakutans who would eventually become the Red Guards. Um, so these beings essentially populated the world through their sacrifice. The fact that they couldn't get out in time. Well, this is very important because certain factions see Lorcan now as a great creator. They led to them becoming mortals and being able to experience things outside of just like whatever is in the void. And other beings like the elves see it as that Lorcan is the reason they lost their immortality. So chiefly this is certain sects of high elves that we'll talk about in later videos. Ones that Chris and me have talked about very shortly in other videos. They're called the Thalmor later. But these races now spread across the world, and the elves, the high elves, became onto the planet in a place called Aldmeris, a continent south of mainland Tamriel. In fact, no one knows exactly where it is on the map because it disappeared at some point in history, and they don't know whatever happened to it. No one's been able to see it or get to it in millennia by the time of the main series games. But before it disappeared, a large sect of high elves moved to the Somerset Isle in what is now South Tamriel, off the coast of mainland Tamriel. There's two major islands. One's called Eleanor. Don't remember the name of the other one. And then there's some other smaller islands around it, like the Isle of Artaeum, where the Sigic Order lives. So they moved there, and some of the other elven sects, instead of going straight there, went to places like Skyrim and Morrowind itself. The ones that went to Morrowind without ever going to Somerset in the beginning were what would become the Dwemer, the dwarves. And the ones that went to Skyrim before ever going anywhere else were the Falmer/Snow Elves, which comes into effect later because we will talk about the dwarves later. The Falmer, not for a while. So the rest of the elves go to the Somerset Isle. Oh, is everything all right?
No, there was just a bug. Sorry.
Okay. The elves go to the Somerset Isle, and from there they set up the worship of their ancestors, these beings that created the world, that kind of thing. Well, something I did not mention before is all the beings that help create the world are called the Aedra. But there's a being group, a sect of these beings that didn't help create the world called the Daedra. Now, the Daedra, because they lost none of their power in creating the world, and thus inhabit these pocket dimensions outside the world called the Planes of Oblivion, which are also kind of around Etheria, are kind of like in the same place as Aetherius and like the world, the universal spectrum, but vibrate at another frequency. So they're not in phase with each other, but they take up the same space. And each plane is ruled, well, each of the major planes is ruled by Daedric Prince. So there we have Molag Bal, the Lord of Domination. You have Mehrunes Dagon, the Lord of Destruction and Political Change. You have Azura, the one of the Moon and Star. You have Nocturnal of like Shadows. So you have them. There's multiple of them, and they all have a different aspect of them that they are kind of the god of. So the beings there are very keen to meddle in the affairs of the mortal races. They love to pick champions and have cults in service to them, to send them souls that they will use as energy or whatever. They're slaves, essentially. And they do this quite often, especially with very big historic characters. They love to do this with. That's why in pretty much every game you play as a big historic character in the world, and thus they often are either your chief enemy or they give you aid in the form of the fact that it entertains them more than anything else. Plus, the items they give you are extremely powerful artifacts, generally created out of their own essence most of the time. There were cults springing up all over the Somerset Isle, dedicated to these Daedra. Now, it was illegal in the Somerset Isle to worship them because they didn't take part in creating the world. They're not really related to the elves in their eyes, and they kind of, like, most of them want to control and dominate lesser life forms, or at least use souls as energy or whatever they do with them, because it's not always specified. So it's illegal. And there's a sect under a guy named Prophet Veloth. This is in what is now called the middle of the Merethic era, which means the era of the elves. And Veloth goes, well, if we can't worship them here, we'll go someplace else and worship our Daedra. So he gets his followers, and they leave. They decide to leave the Somerset Isle, and this is not okay with Trinimac. Trinimac is the one that helped rip the heart of Lorcan out of the chest of Lorcan with Akatosh in the ancient days. We don't know where Ariel is at this point. It's inferred that he had already left and created his own planetoid thing, but Trinimac was still there. And this is important because Trinimac is a great warrior, and he has a great group of followers that follow him into battle, and their goal is to stop this exodus to what they of the Velothi Daedra worshippers. So they go and they stop them before they can leave the Somerset Isle on their ships, and they basically blockade the port so they can't get out. And Veloth prays to the Daedra, and Boethia, one of the major Daedric princes, manifests into Tamriel, which is very rare for a Daedric prince to do this, and fights Trinimac and consumes him. Trinimac is then expelled as the Daedric prince Malakath of the spurned and the ostracized. And his followers become the first of the orcs. And because they are now so different, even more different than the Velothi Daedric princes, Daedric worshippers, and the High Elves are like, you are abominations. Get out of our sight. The orcs go live in tribal communities all over northern Tamriel, and they start following Malakath, who is now a Daedric prince, who was Trinimac, and Malakath teaches them to live like tribal peoples because he was spurned and ostracized, and so is his people, and they're so different to normal elves that it's really hard to explain. They're different right to their core, but they are still elf. They're still of the elven people. They have elven ears still, kind of, but that's pretty much the only trait that any similarity ends at. In fact, of the most beings that also worship Malakath are goblins that aren't even considered intelligent beings, and some sentient giants do it as well. So really the only intelligent people that worship Malakath are the orcs and some very few Daedric cults devoted to him in certain very raw societies. So now that Trinimac is out of the way, the Prophet Veloth leads his people off to what they call Resdane, which is modern-day Morrowind. And they settle all over the continent, the province of Morrowind. And they, instead of going by the High Elves now, they call themselves the Chimer, the Changed, because they believe in different gods. They've adopted different dress. And Morrowind itself is a very different geography to the rest of Tamriel. Because of this volcano, not many actual plants can survive there. So mainland Morrowind, there are actual forests and stuff, but there's also these giant fungal forests. And the island of Vardenfell itself is completely ashland, and there's very few actual like trees and stuff there. It's all giant fungi and volcanic mess because of all of the activity because of the Heart of Lorcan being under the ground there.
Mm-hmm.
So they go there, and the dwarves are already there, but they're underground, and the dwarves don't really care what goes on above. They mind with their own creations of metal and magic mixed to create great things, and their ultimate goal is unknown by the Chimer at this point. But they do think that the Chimer are idiots for worshipping any god. The dwarves in the Elder Scrolls see themselves as unbound by the fates of the past, and only through their own work will they ever achieve what they want, which is kind of to revert to that primordial state that from before the world's creation. So they think they chastise the Chimer for worshiping the Daedra or anybody in general. But that doesn't cause big conflicts, little ones here and there, skirmishes at most. Then the Nords come. The Nords had just arrived in Tamriel and had kicked the snow elves out of Skyrim, and thus wanted to expand their new holdings and crossed into Morrowind. And the dwarves and the Chimer realized they could not fight this threat alone. Even the dwarves didn't really care all that much. The dwarves had already been working with the people of Skyrim. They had settlements all over Tamriel by this point.
Mm-hmm.
Skyrim and Morrowind at this point, and parts of other areas, but not as far as they eventually got. Well, there was a decision made between High Counselor Nerevar, Indoril Nerevar, and the Dwarven King, Dumak Dwarf King. That was his actual name, his title. And there were groups of dwarves that were not happy about this decision and were like, well, I'm not staying and helping these Chimer, these fools that worship any god and who have killed our people in the past because they worship their gods so devotedly. So their leader threw his great hammer Volendrung out to the east and vowed to settle wherever it landed, and it landed in Hammerfell, which is why the province of Hammerfell has that name later on. To the dwarves, it was called Volenfell. When other races came, they translated it to Hammerfell. So they leave, but the rest of the dwarves and the dwarves in Morrowind and the Chimer work together to push the Nords out. And after the Nords have left, because they're like, well, this isn't an easy conquest, so we're not going to stay here. They didn't really lose any battles. They were just like, oh, they actually don't want us to take their land, and they're going to like show off force to stop us. So let's just not deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
That was essentially how it was like said, how it happened. The Nords were content to even fight a battle that they had to work for in that respect. So it also ushered in a period of peace. The two groups worked together and became friends. Indoril, Nerevar, and Dumak created a Resdane where the dwarves would help the Chimer if it was non-religious based, like construction and things like that. And the Chimer would help the dwarves in magical issues that the dwarves couldn't figure out because the dwarves have cut themselves off from some of the darker aspects of magic. So, but meanwhile, underneath the Red Mountain, the chief architect of the Dwemer, Kagranacht, had created 3 tools: Wraithguard, Sunder, and Keening. Keening's a dagger, Wraithguard is a gauntlet, and Sunder is a hammer. These tools were created to manipulate the Heart of Lorcan. The dwarves had found it underneath the Red Mountain and had figured out manipulating it caused very interesting effects. But you couldn't survive the effects. So Wraithguard, these tools were made so you could work with the heart. Keening and Sunder and Wraithguard couldn't be used separately either. They had so much power built into them that unless you were like a super like god tier being,
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't use one without the others or you'd just die. Certain figures like Dragonborns, yes, they can, as well as like people with the right magical protection, but everyday people just couldn't use it without like living. But with all 3, you could do it fine. So Kagranak began working with these tools to manipulate the heart of Lorcan to essentially let the Dwemer become primordial spirits once again. When a certain Chimer that was very friendly with the dwarves, his name was Dagoth of House Dagon, he learned of this manipulation and went and told Indral Nerevar, who was pretty much the leader of the Morrowind Chimer at that point, and his queen Amalexia. And Indral Nerevar goes to Dumac and is like, "What's going on? This is completely against our religion, what you're doing to the heart of Lorcan. This is not okay. No one should be messing with an artifact like that." And Dumac kind of didn't know what was going on at that point. He didn't know that Kagranak was doing this because Kagranak, even though he was like Dumac's like third in command or whatever, would shut himself off in Red Mountain and just not come out. And he'd have an army of dwarven machines and dwarven warriors guarding the Red Mountain, but Dumac didn't know why. So Dumac uses his kingly status to get in and is like, "What's going on?" But before he goes, he tells Nerevar, "Oh, this can't be right. This isn't happening." We don't know exactly how Dagothar knew what was going on. It's implied that Kagranak showed him, but we don't know. So he had assured Nerevar, "This can't be happening." Well, it was. And Dumac comes out and is like, well, Kagranak has some good points, so I'm going to allow it to continue. But I kind of have to go with the lie that I already told Nerevar because he's my friend and I don't want to, like, hurt him. So shortly after, Dagothar brings the news that it is still happening, and Dumac lied and now knows of the fact that it's going on. Mm-hmm. And the war of the First Council erupts, and the dwarves and the Chimer are at war. And by this point, the Chimer had set up the Great Houses system, where basically a few major families controlled like all the major settlements, and then underneath them there were like lower families. It was like a caste system almost. Mm-hmm. But the major families like kind of ruled the province together. So there was like House Indoril, like where Nerevar was from. There was House Dress, House Telvanni, where the Telvanni mages come from. They co-ruled the province, and they just did so with a system that worked. Because there was no majority there. It wasn't an even system, so there was always a majority in choices. And the cool thing is they even had a way to deal with discrepancies that were created before they could create like a real conflict between the houses where like a civil war could erupt, mm-hmm. in the form of the Morag Tong, state-sanctioned assassins. Okay. So you would get an assassination contract. It would be called a writ of execution. And they only lasted a year. And if you survived that year, then the only person that could collect on them was a Morag Tong assassin or the person that ordered the writ. So no one else could just go kill it. It wasn't like an open season bounty. Mm-hmm. It was only these people could do it. And if they survived the year, the charges were dropped and the assassination thing was dropped, and you couldn't bring up the issue again. It's kind of like how if you get off in the United States with a crime and like you can't be tried for the same crime twice, mm-hmm. the same like event. Yeah. So this system had created a more peace with these houses because no issue could be brought up if it survived, and these writs, the assassin or whoever carried out the contract would go to the authorities and be like, "I killed this person. Here's my writ of execution," and they couldn't be tried for it. They were absolved of the crime. They had to go do that though, otherwise they were still susceptible to the law.
Yeah, no, of course.
So this had kept the great houses unified for centuries and lasts even into the time late, into the events of Skyrim. This guild is still somewhat around. So almost 4,000 years later. So they are doing and this war breaks out between the dwarves and the Chimer. And it's kind of back and forth, and they learn finally, the Chimer get to Vardenfell, because they had pretty much been kicked off Vardenfell for a while, and they laid siege to the Red Mountain. And Indoril Nerevar and his lieutenants, So the Sil, Vivek, Amalexia, and Dagoth all storm the mountain. They get inside, and they find Kagranak stab the heart of Lorcan with keening while beating it with sunder. So, and instantly gone. All the dwarves are gone in that much. Well, as we explained before, they zero-summed and are now gone.
Mm-hmm.
And no one knows where they went. It is implied that they kind of writ themselves out of creation altogether, but that's it. So Nerevar sees this and is like, yeah, we can't touch this thing. Let's just vow to leave the heart here. No one touches it. The thing the dwarves put it in called the Numidium, we're not going to touch that either. And he basically makes everyone swear an oath not to use it. Well, Dagoth was the first to break that. And so Amalexia, So the Sil, Vivek, and Nerevar go back to deal with Dagoth. And Dagoth is slain for the first time then. But his essence is still around. It's kind of confusing, but yeah. So he's there. And but Dagoth reveals how easy it could be to become gods among men by using the heart the right way. By hitting the heart the right way and having the right intention, you wouldn't zero-sum like the dwarves did, but you'd become gods. You'd have immortality and endless magical power. So the other three, Vivek, So the Sil, and Amalexia, are like, this is a pretty tempting deal. He taught us exactly how to do this. But they were still bound to their oath to Nerevar. So they killed Nerevar. Before even leaving, they just turned and killed Nerevar. One of them was Nerevar's wife.
Oh, Lord.
And Amalexia was kind of the biggest proponent of let's do it. So, yeah, that happened. And they then used the tools to become what is called the Tribunal Temple. They became man gods, essentially. They had given themselves immortality and magical power, but there was a restraint. Every year, they'd have to come back and do this ritual again on the heart to like restore their magical power. They were still immortal, but their magic dwindled over time, and so they would have to go back and forth and do it. So they did, but eventually, at that point, Azura, the one of the Daedric princes, had seen the betrayal of Indoril Nerevar, the greatest hero the Chimer had ever had. And again, manifested right in front of the tribunal and was like, this was your decision, and you've cursed your entire race. Instantly, all of the Chimer turned into the Dunmer, the Dark Elves. So they had golden skin and normal eyes originally, and now they all have dark purple skin to light purple skin. So purple skin and red eyes instantly. And this coincided with an eruption of the Red Mountain. When they used those tools, it caused the heart to freak out, and the mountain or the volcano erupted.
Mm-hmm.
But because they were now immortal and had these superpowers, they got out. And they were changed. Some of them, Amalexia stayed looking like her Chimer self. Fully Chimer. Vivek was half Chimer, half Dunmer looking, even to the eyes. So he had like pretty much a seam down the middle of him of half and half. And So the Sil looked almost entirely Dunmer at that point. So each one represented part of what happened. So the one was after the change, one was during the change, one was before the change.
Okay, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because there are beings out there that are either, sometimes there are some in the big creator councils that are either positive, negative, or neutral, and that actually makes a lot of sense. So what you've been describing from the beginning, though, like beings that were trapped within their own creation like that, are essentially how the Orions and them came in, and they were trapped within their own experiment. Basically creation, think about it this way, creation itself tricked them, so to speak, into doing what they did here. And now they're part of the whole overall experience we have here. They actually, in their own way, assist us in evolving when they're trying to prevent us from evolving. And that actually makes a lot of sense. Also, the gods of the old world did, some of them did turn into planetoids like Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, all of them, and they are essentially essentially outside of the Earth illusion, but they're still trapped within the AI or clockmaker's construct. The thing they created, they're stuck within. And the breakdown of all the councils and families that you were telling me about is also not only the breakdown of the Cabal clans, but the breakdown of the Orion councils when they went from first generation to second generation. Second generation are the Akhenaten looking guys. Mm-hmm. And the first generation are the Orion lords. They look like white elves. They look like high and white elves. So that actually is extremely accurate. When you go back to the void, when in the very, very beginning, you can actually create within void space, the real void space between universes. You can actually take the void energy and create. This is why the guardians in the void space don't like people bilocating into their realm, because then they start to create all sorts of weird constructs and everything, and it could spark an omniverse you don't want, a multiversal aspect you don't want. So they bar anybody from coming in. If they want to communicate with people, they put themselves in a little box, like a little quantum cage or something, and they will bilocate and project an avatar from their from through that into more of a mortal looking form to talk to you. These other celestials can do the same thing, where they bend light and create like a holographic avatar to come down and actually speak to people. It gets into way back into the whole when Orion's ripped across space-time, and they ripped across through void space. They ended up creating all these fractures. We talked about in the Daggerfall episode with the Mandela effect and everything. They ended up creating all these fractures. But in those some of those fractures, they created other realities that had more different duplications of humanity, which would be aspects, other aspects and sub-aspects of the multiverse. And now those fragments are having to come back together. This is what you have for the Mandela effect now. And these fractures and fragments all have their own, sometimes their own sentience, their own essence. And in some cases, they do have their own creator that is within them. Now, there are the other beings, like you compared with the realms of oblivion, the different Daedric princes. Now, they have their own, like you could call it planes of oblivion, and they're called the photonic realms. And they exist within these bent light, fractured photonic realms. And they can actually control those bits of fracture, and then they can bend them into what I call negative 0 points and basically pocket dimensions. So that's actually a real thing that they have been depicting in the game, and the fact that the whole heart of Lorcan, we said this in the previous one, almost is like the record of the Earth, the record of that time. Mm-hmm. But also, they're starting to pull this out of my head now. Starting to touch on this. They could also undo, which some of these negative elven groups, like negative elven Syrian groups, have gone underground and actually had put these bombs, these like really big bombs made of some of these fractures. Some people call them toplet bombs, and they will literally cancel out reality around them. And so you have to have something equally as powerful, another fragment that's of another polarity, to cancel them out and just basically zero them out, pretty much in the same way. Mm. And when before that would occur, if one of them would explode, let's say under a volcano, it would cancel out the region that it explodes outward in, as if that thing didn't exist, and it would reverberate across time in all these fractures. Oh, that's why these bombs are incredibly dangerous, because they reverberate through reality. The same can be said for nuclear power too. It does the same thing, and it reverbs through nuclear power, because it's using the same identical type of power capability as, say, a toplet bomb. That's why some races won't come near Earth because of that capability. That basically man got a hold of a tool that man was never meant to wield at this particular time, kind of like the weapons of the Adrian Daedra.
Yep.
It's essentially along the same line.
Weapon.
That's why other races and other versions of humans from some of these fractals come in to actually disable nuclear weapons all the time, because that's how dangerous it is.
Yeah, because the Daedric artifacts alone can create so much chaos on the plane, like the mortal plane, that it can start entire wars over it and stuff. But it's actually interesting that you said that they wanted to undo creation, because Dagoth, when he comes back later on in history, he holes up in Red Mountain and tries to end the tribunal's immortality and power by like messing with the heart again, saying he was doing it to like respect Nerevar because they betrayed him, and he saw it as like a ghost form for right after he had, like, his physical body had been killed. But to continue on with the story, the tribunal and Azura talk for a short time, and Azura basically goes, Nerevar will continue to reincarnate until you guys are no longer in power. Nerevar will just keep coming back, and certain events will have to transpire, and it comes in the form of the Nerevarine prophecy, and certain groups learned about this, but most of the tribunal were very adamant on trying to keep that quiet. They didn't want anyone to know about that. And I'm just going to pull up the prophecy, because it's a very interesting little prophecy that like allows your character when you play through the game to fit into it, and it's short. So let me just pull it up.
Okay.
There we go. A prisoner born on a certain day to uncertain parents would be sent under guard to Morrowind, would overcome numerous trials, and eventually unite the province and cast down the tribunal as false gods. So, and then there's the trials of it, and so that's pretty much essentially what happens. And so, on a certain day to uncertain parents, incarnate Mudan Star Reborn, which Mudan Star is Azura's like realm, kind of. It's never explained what it actually is, but because stars were already explained what they were. So, but that just means Nerevar's like reincarnation will be born. Neither blight nor age can harm him. The curse of flesh before him flies, which alludes to an event that you overcome in the games. The next one is, in caverns dark, Azura's eyes see and make to shine the moon and star. And this deals with how he gets a specific object associated to Azura, which only Nerevar could wear. The first Nerevar could wear, and it proves that he is the reincarnation. The fourth is, a stranger's voice unites the houses. 3 hells call him Horator, which Horator was the office name that Indral Nerevar originally held, which basically means like hero of the realm. So the fifth trial is, a stranger's hand unites the Velothi. 4 tribes call him Nerevarine, which Nerevarine just means the reincarnation of Nerevar. And the tribes are the Ashlander tribes, the groups that never stopped worshipping the Daedra and discredit the tribunal, but the tribunal just didn't wipe them off the face of the map because they were like insignificant. The 6th trial, he honors the blood of the tribes unmourned. He eats their sin and is reborn. This is when all the tribes of the Ashlanders basically are like, yes, he is Nerevarine. And he eats their sin by basically going, they were the faithful ones that didn't give up on like their ancient religion. And then the 7th trial, his mercy frees the cursed false gods, binds the broken, and redeems the mad. And that has to do with the end of the game's main quest.
Okay.
So, and to start, so the Tribunal are the main gods of Morrowind for a very long time, until late in the 3rd era, during the rule of Uriel Septim the 7th. So the first 4 Elder Scrolls games are all under the rule of the same emperor, just different points of his rule. Well, basically, Uriel Septim was somehow given the information about this prophecy and learned who the Nerevarine was in this current incarnation, and had him sent under guard as a prisoner to Vardenfell to, I believe the name of the city is, let me see if I can find it, Seydanine. It's a port town on the southern part of the coast of Vardenfell. And because the game doesn't like specify exactly when you were born and stuff, it lets you create your character to be whatever you want between any of the races and basic like just age or whatever, because you can change what your character looks like, so it's implied that the age changes. But you can the lore version of the Nerevarine is a male Dunmer. That's all that it is said, with black hair. That's all that's literally given. But so he goes and he is instructed as soon as he gets off the boat to go find a guy named Caius. And Caius is in the city of, let me see if I can figure, Balmora. I'm looking at a map of the game off to the side, so that's how I'm like why I'm looking off to the side. But Balmora is where now Caius is an agent of the Blades, kind of the Emperor's secret guards, as well as they ensure that the Emperor's will is done. And Caius kind of puts him on the path to becoming Nerevarine. But Caius straight up says, the Emperor believes you're Nerevarine, but nobody here does. You're an Outlander. No one trusts you here. So go out and like make a name for yourself before you can even try for the prophecy, because people will just kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So he instructs you to join one of the major guilds, either the Mages Guild or the Fighters Guild, which are just the Fighters Guild is essentially a mercenary guild. They'll do jobs for the price, but they're not as bad as mercenaries. They're not bad people generally.
Mm-hmm.
The Mages Guild are just like a mage of mages, like a guild of mages, just working together, better understand magic and utilize it, and also sell services of magic to the people that don't know how to use it. There's also other guilds like the Dark Brotherhood, which is an assassin's guild, the Morg Tong, another assassin's guild, the Thieves Guild, which is like a kind of like an underworld crime organization.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all over the place, but he basically is like, join one of these guilds and make a name for yourself. So you do, and eventually you kind of just get pushed into doing the main quest and fulfilling all of the parts of the prophecy that I read out. So by going back to the prophecy, on a certain day to uncertain parents, he's reborn. You have no control over that. It's basically just the start of the game. You're there.
Mm-hmm.
Neither blight nor age can harm him. The curse of flesh before him flies. So this happens because Dagothar has come back to life and is now working on the Heart of Lorcan to try to undo the power of the tribunal, but he doesn't have minions. So he creates a disease called Corpus, which corrupts people that get it and turns them into like these massive like abominations, but they become immortal as a result of getting it. Well, you get it in the game, but none of the negative effects are started on you yet. It's like a stage disease, kind of like cancer, where like it gets worse over time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you go meet a mage who figures out a cure for it, and you get cured, and thus, but the cure isn't like it's all gone. It just stops the negative effects of the disease. So he keeps the immortality, well, like the unaging immortality. Like he can still be killed like with like weapons or magic and stuff, but he can't like age or die of old age or anything like that. And because he's technically got a disease, he actually like doesn't get other diseases because it fights off the other diseases. So that's where the second part of the prophecy comes into play. Like he beats this crazy curse of disease. The third one is in caverns dark, Azura's eyes see and make to shine the moon and star. The Nerevarine gets the ring of Indral Nerevar, which is the moon and star, the symbol of Azura, and is able to put it on, and only Indral Nerevar's reincarnates and Indral Nerevar himself could put it on. Everyone else just dies. So, and that's enough to like prove to people, yes, this is kind of who he is. To the character now at this point, you're known to be the Nerevarine, but you still have to prove it to other races, because like there are some people that are like, you just forged that ring.
You just made it up, yeah. That sounds a lot like, with pieces of ancient technology, they'll recognize the energy and quantum signature of their original creator or their original forger. And there are like say King Arthur's Excalibur, for instance. They base this. They had this in Stargate SG-1 when they went into the Arthurian legend. When they said somebody only of a certain genetic type could pick up the sword because it was a piece of technology that would biometrically read
That
the
makes sense. Yes.
genetics. But in this type of situation, quantum-like based technology like this, and dimensional-based technology, like say a topple bomb or something like that, will actually respond to, and it has a consciousness too, will respond to the reincarnation of the original creator, even if that person doesn't remember they are. These devices are programmed to tell them, hey, yes, you are indeed this person. I've proven it. You have the same signet. You have the same signature. Here, you can use this now. And that sounds exactly like a piece of
Yep.
technology like that.
And it actually also, it kind of reminds me of some of the things you hear about on like the cosmic disclosure shows where they're talking about how there's certain ships that seem to be like of the exact same DNA and only respond to the beings that like own it.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
makes sense.
that's the same thing. Yeah, that's the exact same thing. Like also, we were talking about on the after show one time with being named Redbeard. You know, he was in Anakam, and he was talking about how they had these. He had a ship that was a piece of technology that would unfold, and it would respond to him and whoever he authorized to use it afterwards.
Okay, so the next bit is a stranger's voice unites the houses. 3 halls call him Horator. So basically, 3 of these families that are in charge of the nation
Mm-hmm.
call him like hero of their house, and which is a very big deal because most of the time you're not even allowed to enter another house if you're in service to one of them.
Hmm.
You basically give an oath, sort of like an oath when you're joining a military or something. Like, I will only serve this one house, and all other obligations are lesser than mine to this house, sort of.
Okay.
Then the 5th trial. A stranger's hand unites the Velothi. 4 tribes call him Naravareen. There are 8 Ashlander tribes, and that means he had 4 of the Ashlander tribes, and the only 4 on Vardenfell. Because there's 4 on Vardenfell, 4 on the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
And the 4 on Vardenfell all recognize the like your character as Nervarine, which they were the ones that kept up the belief in the Nervarine prophecy. So it's very important that they're backing him. The 6th trial. He honors the blood of the tribes unmourned. He eats their sin and is reborn. This has to do with how there were tribes that the tribunal that weren't content to like go live out in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. When the tribunal took over, and they did wipe them right out, like just happily wipe them right out, and did so in a way where they basically would be seen as like enemies of the state. Well, he basically makes it so they're no longer seen that way. He shows up, and the people are starting to go, okay, the tribunal kind of pulled the wool over our eyes here. Around this time, you also meet Vivek, one of the members of the tribunal, who he asks you a series of questions that only Indral Nerevar would pretty much be the one to answer, and they used to be friends when Indral Nerevar was still alive. Mm-hmm. So he confirms that yes, you are the reincarnation of Indral Nerevar to himself, and gives you his blessing to go on unopposed. He's basically trying to he's trying to indoctrinate you into the tribunal system as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Because he realizes that the prophecy is now coming to pass, and regardless of what's going to happen, he's going to start losing his power at this point. Especially because they have been able to go back and do this ritual to regain their power in a very long time, because Dagothr is with the heart, and his evil has been leaking out of Red Mountain, so they had to build like a magic fence sustained by soul energy to keep him like locked in there.
Okay.
And with Vivek's blessing, you are then allowed to go beyond the fence and take out Dagothr.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, like the quantum barriers and soul traps and everything. And this also makes sense that there's heroes for these different families. We're eventually going to do a show called, we dubbed it We Are the Champions. I always say this person's a champion for a particular Cabal house or something like that. You know, like for and against, or basically putting out a certain amount of information. Like they select, these Cabal families select their champions. Those houses select their heroes, essentially, to be a hero or a distraction in society. So
are these like political figures? These like political figures you're talking about?
Political figures or everyday people that
Hmm.
will basically be either the head of a false flag, a head of a false revolution, or the head of a false villain figure or hero figure. And they will actually anoint those particular people. They'll endow them with programming, and then their memory is wiped so that they
Okay, so these
can't believe
people
they're that person.
are not aware that they are this. Okay, that
Yeah,
was going to be my next question about that, which
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, but in this situation, it's good, kind of.
yeah.
So, the seventh trial, his mercy frees the cursed false gods. So basically, Indral Nerevar undoes their immortality with the Heart of Lorcan. After and the second part of 7 is he binds the broken and redeems the mad. Binds the broken and redeems the mad has to do with him. Sort of, Dagothir was right about the tribunal. They weren't good. They had betrayed the one good guy left.
Mm-hmm.
But he was still crazy and was raving lunatic at that point that wanted to control the entire world. So the Nerevarine kills him, finally, forever, and then uses the tools to end the tribunal's immortality.
Okay.
And this was immortality that wasn't like they could just be killed. This was immortality like you could shoot them with whatever you wanted to, any weapon, and they'd live. So he ends that. And that it is then it's implied that, like, yes, he goes around and kills them all, but the story events the game events show you differently. So directly right after all this happens, you go back to Vivek, and he goes, I'm no longer immortal. I've got maybe 100 years at best. So there's really no, well, I think he's like, I got like 300 years at best because that's like the average dark elf lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, so there's really no point in killing me. I'm a useful guy to have around because I'm still considered kind of powerful, and there are still people that are going to inevitably worship me. So and they become very good friends. Vivek at this point, Vivek sees him as Indral Nerevar, his old friend, so that he re-sparks that friendship, essentially.
Oh, okay.
But Amalexia is freaking out. So she's another one of the tribunal that you don't meet during the game's original main quest. And this kicks off the first of the downloadable contents, which are all considered like really happened, but when the games came out, you had to pay extra. Now every release of the games, if they are re-released, they come with it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically summons you to her city, which is on the mainland, and is like, you so the sill is going kind of weird, and we need to see what's up with him, so go check it out. Vivek gives you like a pass and says she won't attack you or anything. She can't. So you learn that she basically frames So the Sill, the other one of the tribunal, to attempting to kill off or control more, basically just like kill her. In reality, she framed him and killed him, and when you find this out, after all the quests of the DLC, she's like, you got way too far than you were supposed to. You're supposed to die in this entire thing. So now she fights you.
Mm-hmm.
You kill her. So now 2 of the tribunal members are dead. And it's just you and Vivek are the only like 2 major people left from that ancient time.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get hit up basically by like a courier, and he brings you a thing and tells you that the island of Solstheim, which is technically under the control of the great houses of Morrowind,
Mm-hmm.
but up in the Sea of Ghosts. So north of mainland Tamriel, it's off the course. It's very closely tied into both Morrowind and Skyrim's history,
Mm-hmm.
because it's directly close to both, and major events for the Nords and the Darnmur have taken place on both. And so actually both populations live there too. So they go, and you go there, and you learn about this prophecy called the Blood Moon Prophecy from the indigenous Nords there, called the Skal. They view different gods than everyone else in the entire series. They view being called the Allmaker, which is essentially like a source being, but they never explain like who it is or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about how they have dealt with the Daedra in the past, not like worshipped them, but they see them as like enemies. So like Hircine, the god of the hunt, and Hermamora are the 2 you hear about most from them, and Hermaeus Mora, the god of knowledge and like because they actually have some knowledge he doesn't know, and that intrigues Hermaeus Mora. We'll get into that in the later videos. But Hircine does this thing on Solstheim at the end of every era, and so you know that the end of the era is coming, but it hasn't happened yet, where it's called the Blood Moon Prophecy. And essentially, he melds his Plane of Oblivion with the Isle of Solstheim and leads a great hunt. And whatever the chosen prey is, it gets a chance to escape, but like to escape it has to best him in single combat, and otherwise it continues until the prey is dead.
Oh, okay.
And because you're already this great hero, you're summoned there to be one of the hunters. But little do you know, you're also a prey object for some of the other hunters. So you hunt down what you have to hunt down, and then other big hunters who are also like great beasts and other heroic people come at you, and you're like, what is this? And they're claiming the same thing you claim, that this is for the Blood Moon Prophecy. And you realize that you've been kind of duped a little bit, and Hircine essentially just wanted like all these major heroes to die. But that didn't happen. And you go and confront Hircine, and you actually beat him in single combat with his own spear, and he freaks out about it. And he's like, you've escaped me this time, and then the DLC ends. And as of right now, that is the ending of the playable like linear story of the Nerevarine. They're the guild's quest lines and stuff, but technically speaking, sometimes in the games, like historical lore that you hear about in later games, the guild quest lines are not always carried out by the exact hero that like you play as, but it's just to tell a story that happened at the same time, or it's like a different, or you're like posing as someone else.
Okay.
But what is known is that after the events of the Blood Moon Prophecy and you beating Hircine, you go back with Vivek, and the two decide to leave Tamriel and go on an expedition to Akavir and are never seen again. It's implied that the Nerevarine is still alive because he can't be killed by like disease or anything. But Vivek, he's like, I only got a couple 100 years left, so let's go. Then you don't hear about them again. And that's really it for the main story. Race-wise, there's a few new races involved, but we'll get into that after. Anything you want to bring up, if you heard anything that resonated with you in the last bit.
Oh yeah, that's actually quite interesting. You know, with Hircine and the Blood Moon hunt, came to find out from some of the dogmen races that there's actually the Hircine is actually based on an Orion lord, basically one of the original Orion lords that actually took some of his own coding and corrupted Antiquan DNA to create like how the beast blood would be bound to Hircine in the Elder Scrolls game. We can also get more into that when we get into the Skyrim game. But it's but yeah, Rotham, one of the dog people up north, pointed this out to me, and I can include the recording of that at the end of this episode too. The channeling he came in to talk about it, where he said it was basically that would be certain codes that were bound to a particular Orion lord, and Hircine was based on an Orion lord that bastardized the Antiquan genome and created a set of unstable werewolf coding that could basically come out at any moment, and it's bound through the moon like a lens. And that's why it's an unstable coating that comes out during the full moon. And back to the beginning, when you said the group had escaped before they were bound to their creation, and that the stars are the basically the portals out. That there's actually a truth to that, where there was an ancient belief system where people believed those were like portals to heaven. And also there was an old viewpoint where there were spheres that would surround the earth, and those were portals to heaven too, but those were soul traps. These stars are actually portals to other dimensions, other universes, other omniverses. They can actually lead to other areas. So that actually coincides. Like a being like that would be able to use a star to go basically anywhere in creation that they want, and not be bound by the illusion. This actually sounds like some of the beings that actually escaped from here in this system before it became completely self-contained and self-farming. Joanna and I call the Earth a self-made farm because people here, through the indoctrination and programming, basically keep the farm self-sustaining. Some beings got out of here and actually used the sun to actually escape during the original invasion. And some of those beings can actually speak back and actually talk to us from outside the system construct, pretty much. And they got out of here before the illusion really came down like a hammer. So that there's actually a truth to that as well. That's just right straight out of galactic history. I don't know the elaborate names that some of these beings have, like how the Elder Scrolls lore has, but it fits pretty much identically with some of the ancient galactic history.
Going back to her scene, it would be interesting to see if other races that have like an animal like look to them got corrupted by the same Orion Lord to create like other werebeasts, because her scene created not just werewolves in the Elder Scrolls, he also created all werebeasts. So there's like were sharks, were like crocodiles, were bears, all kinds of them. So it would be interesting to see if maybe that did happen with this Orion Lord.
What's interesting, you said about also some of the different beings. There's galactics out there that, like I was told any animal species you can think of has basically a were version of it. Birds, bugs, also otters, beavers, other rodents, rats. And that they have like a chimera type of capability in some instances, like in the show Grimm, where all the cryptid type people can shift into their cryptid form. It's very much like that. And I know the Antiqua did create the original werewolf coding, but then the Orion Lord and various other scientists created the different chimera effects and stuff like that. So that'd be very, very interesting. I know. If you're at that point, we can try to bring in a galactic to concur with this. But
we got a couple races we can go into that are.
Okay, yeah, go into that
If you want, to bring in the galactic, we can.
But go into yours, and then I'll.
Okay. You get to meet the Slode for the first time. In a main series game, you get to meet the Slode. The Slode are like these giant slugs. They're born in the water, and then they come on to land, and they're intelligent. But they're not from Tamriel itself. They're from an island off the west coast, like further than the Somerset Isle. And they are very commonly known as like an enemy of the High Elves and even Tamriel in general. They've been known to like send diseases to Tamriel just to see what happens, because they're very logical beings to the point where like they care very little about like life in general. They like they're born in these big batches, and of the batches, one makes it out of the water. It like they are like the batches kill each other off until there's one, and then it gets out of the water and becomes like the one that gets to carry on the lineage. And they are known as great necromancers, and they actually worship Menemarco, the king of worms, in some respect, because he's a powerful necromancer.
Okay.
And they have been known to after wars in Tamriel, they'll just come and grab all the bodies and then use them to like create necromantic armies and stuff to like do their bidding. And so you get to meet one of them for the first time, and he's just a trader. You literally just meet the one that's like, I like trading, so I came here to trade because Morrowind's got weird stuff that my homeland doesn't. But these beings, like their personal experiments like mean more to them than like even their own race's continued survival. So they'll do like experiments on each other, and it kind of reminds me of like how the Greys see us is how they see pretty much life in general. As like just something.
Zeta groups, yeah.
They'll be like, oh, we put this true, like we're doing this, and your free will doesn't really matter because it involves what we've been doing for years. That sort of thing.
Your individual free will doesn't matter. Like, say, if you belong to a certain family that gave consent for the experiments in some way, or as a rival sect or something like that, they'll continue to do the experiments on that entire family line for generations and generations. So yeah, it fits the same. It fits the same mentality as some of the Orion Greys are a little more hostile. Then you have the Zeta Greys that sometimes are just plain emotionless. Sometimes they're passionate, depending on how many codexes they claim. But yeah, they also are worshippers of a god too. I don't know the god's name per se, but they worship like a god of creation as well. So the Zetas actually do have a deity. People generally don't know that, but they do have a deity. They're very secular, and they actually do raise beings from the dead. They actually like to claim, the Zetas like to claim dead bodies and actually like to rework them and then to create familiars for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a very common thing. Like you hear the old witch stories where they have like a little Igor like creature or something like that with them. That's the Zeta Grey.
Oh, like the familiars, yeah.
Yeah, the familiars. Yeah, that's the Zeta Greys that do crap
Okay.
like that. They actually so that's interesting that they slowed have a comparison to both Orion Grey interest and Zeta Grey interest. So that's very
And actually, I'm gonna show a picture of this load because they're you might recognize their like image from a race and maybe see that, but
yeah.
I'm just gonna show you on my phone. But that's what they look like in the Elder Scrolls Online. There's a couple different like views of them. Some of them look like that, and then some of them have like, I don't know the name of them, but you know, like those, like they're like really little like microorganisms and they have like that circular mouth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The lamprey. Yeah.
No. Like they're called like something bears. They're really they're like,
Oh, yeah. Those little tiny microorganisms that can survive in space. Yeah. Those.
yes, those ones. They have there's some that have like a face like that.
Yeah, and that race that you showed me, this leads into a really interesting story that I may include the recordings from this at the end of this one too, because that race looks like it's almost like it's part frog, part lizard, right there. And there is an augment race out there that is part frog, part lizard, and part fish. That looks like that. They're not always fat like that. Sometimes they're slender. And these are dreams that I've been having of this particular race. This was actually quite fascinating. This particular race will orchestrate basically a culling in a society to try to erase or get rid of a particular group, society, or set of genetics that they don't favor. The dream sequence was where I was seeing it was being narrated by this being or a person involved in this castle, and I was told this castle actually existed in history, and it looked like European, like medieval architecture, and in this dream sequence, I was seeing basically a conflict going on. People were starting to fight. And then I heard the narrator say, and this is when I had to basically reset everything. And then I saw a man up in a tower putting a sign up that said, reset. And it was in a tower that had a human-like face on one side. It was a statue, like it was a castle, but it had a statue face on one side. And then he put this colored flag up that said reset. And everybody around the castle was on fire on the inside. And I saw the look of this being, and the being looked exactly like that, except it was thinner and was in a top coat, and it was basically had Draco eyes, had a fish gills on the neck, and had a triangular shaped head, kind of like that. What happened was, in order to what the Orions were wanting was to erase that particular subculture, or a culture that was basically could unite against them at some point.
Mm-hmm.
It's my belief it was part of the Tartarian Empire, or at least a fragment of it, or a piece of history that survived their erasure in the beginning. But what happened was, any of the people that would escape and go down into the sewer system, they were compelled to go down in the sewer system, and there were those creatures waiting for them down there, and basically ate them. And there were no bones, no nothing. This is why you have some cultures that have no bones of any kind, no remains, and it's just some kind of ruin. You don't know what the hell it is. Chances are those creatures had actually been there, and they had teeth kind of like a shark, and they have a fin on the back of their neck here. And very similar in look to that. There are some fat ones that look like that as well. And there's also another fat type of reptilian that looks like that called the harush. And they are like this little Buddha-looking reptilian that also they consume souls. And they have like a necklace around their neck that actually has souls and like these little orbs and stuff like that, little quantum glass orbs and stuff like that. They're nasty creatures. I've run across them recently in some sessions and in dream sequence as well. But these frog fish and Draco type beings are basically, they have the qualities of an amphibian, they have the qualities of a reptilian, and the qualities of fish. So they can actually get around. They also live, there's a variation of them that live under cities that they were programmed to conduct population control. That's why you have homeless that wander. You know,
is that where like the stories of like sewer, like gator reptilian things come from?
That's where some of those stories come from. And these creatures live in an old subset of ruins that were underneath, possibly like that castle, where they just kept the sewer system and other cultures built on top of ruins. And these creatures actually exist under cities. And in Japanese myth and lore, they're actually a trickster deity that actually tries to trick people into water, going into the water, like basically cursing at them, saying, taunting them, like, taunting their ego or something like that, saying, oh, you have a small penis or something like that. They'll say something like that to you. Go, what? I'm going to contest that. They'll go, well, then get in the water, and then this being tricks them into the water and then consumes them. Exactly what happened in that dream sequence where I saw these beings, or these people, going under into the sewer system. This stretches back to an earlier dream that I had when I was a kid, that I would always see the growling, snarling face of one of these beings, no matter where I was in water. And it was a past life of mine where I had experienced this. And it was reflecting back at me until I figured out what the hell it was. And what it was doing was also tricking people into the flowing water, tried to basically lead to them or a group of them. And that's how they hunt too. So, and that's very interesting how they had a composite of at least 3 or 4 different groups in that species.
Yeah, and it would be remiss if we don't bring up the major race that inhabits the provinces that the games are played in now with each video. I kind of thought of this in between our last recordings. So the major race that inhabits Morrowind are the Dunmer, and they're the Dark Elves. By this point in history, they were the Chimer, which were just a sect of High Elves. And but so the Dunmer, this is just some art I found just now, but that's what a Dunmer would look like, essentially.
Yeah, and Orion Lord can look like that too. So can a Syrian servant as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So that's what the Dunmer would look like, and that's them. You get some other little like beings that are brought up, kind of like different flora and fauna because of the cool different like landscape of Morrowind. So you have like the Netches, which are like big jellyfish like beings, and most of the flora and fauna of Morrowind are insectoid in some sort of way. So you have the Nyx Hound, which is kind of like you took like a dog form, but it's a bug. Like it's a bug like the size of a dog, and it fills that niche in like the ecosystem. But it's like a big bug. And it's kind of like a grasshopper. It's got like grasshopper legs.
Okay, yeah.
And then you have the Netches, which are these big, like they look like jellyfish mixed with like octopuses, but they don't have as many tentacles. They only have like 6, I think. And they don't have any visible eyes or anything, but they float around.
I saw those in Solstheim in the Skyrim DLC.
Yes, they are there. You also have, they're called like atlets, and they're kind of like these bipedal, fat, reptilian things that run around and are kind of just like a mouth on legs. If you get what I'm saying, it's just got like a mouth on legs.
These things sound like the different variations. Also, if you look back in Greek mythology, when you see that some of the different variations of like, say, like animals that, say, Poseidon created when he was trying to woo Athena, pretty much. Eventually, he creates the horse out of
Mhm.
all that mess, but he ends up creating the giraffe, the zebra, all these other weird concoctions, and that is actually a genetic laboratory where somebody is trying to create the different variations, just like those different creatures. You have like the octopus here, which was actually the codes that created that were both Orion and another race, seafaring race. They harvested from another planet that looked a little bit different. They added their own brain capabilities to it, and you have the octopus here now. And that sounds like also the jellyfish that we have are basically another animal version of a galactic that actually flew inside of tubule fluidic type ships, like contained water that would kind of almost like blob
Oh
through
wow, that's kind of
creation like that. And they were a technologically advanced species that got harvested, and the Orions used their DNA to create a variant of different strange creatures that every now and again one will turn bad and that's in the ether and come after you or is sent to you or something like that. It's kind of like a targeting. Anybody that's targeted as like a targeting sigil or something on them, sometimes they'll get hit with these octopus entity type beings that are slightly different than our seafaring octopus. They're like an etheric version of them. They're kind of like a djinn in a way.
Mhm.
But yeah, the different species that you're mentioning, even plants sound like the genetic variants of different species that I've seen that the Orion had a hand in creating.
Yeah, even and then there's one other kind of like flora fauna thing that's kind of interesting. It's called the quama,
Mm-hmm.
and they're insects with various different like kinds of them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're like the Dunmer farm them,
Okay.
and that's so it's just interesting that they basically they mine their chitin and use their chitin to make like armor and some other stuff, as well as the fact that they eat the eggs.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like like how Earth is a farm that that some of these Orions. I've heard of even human pelt trading by some
Oh,
races
that's
too, and
disgusting.
different cryptid trading and stuff like that. So that actually makes sense how they would include that in the farming. I don't think it's as common anymore, but yeah, they're. Once we get out there in the galaxy, we'll probably find different stashes of those things once we get out there. But the Dunmer actually farming those different plants like that with the different capabilities. That sounds like how Earth is with the different variants of humans, plants, and creatures here that are being farmed for energy and
Well,
genetics.
the Dunmer farming brings me into the last topic I wanted to bring up about this is the Dunmer and their views on other races.
Hmm.
They are the most prejudiced race on Tamriel. Anyone that's not an elf is inferior. Anyone that is inferior to the point where they're like only seen as good for slave labor.
Hmm.
But due to the harsh conditions of Morrowind, slaves don't last that long if they're not of one of two races. So the Dunmer tend to have Argonian or Khajiit slaves, and they have a lot of them. And in fact, the biggest reason that the Dunmer during the events of Skyrim are like such a diminished race, like they seem like their glory is past, is
Hmm.
because one, they were weakened after the tribunal was gone. The Oblivion Crisis came in and just beat the crap out of them, which we'll talk about in our next video.
Hmm.
But then the Argonians, to get revenge, saw the Dunmer in this weakened state and invaded and beat the shit out of them even more. And the Argoni, yeah, but the Dunmer, there are certain like entire of those like royal family groups that will their whole thing is like slave importation and trade, and because they live like right on the border with where the Argonians come from in Black Marsh, they will cross the border, kidnap a ton of them, bring them back to sell them into slavery on plantations or whatever they used for.
Well, that actually makes sense. That's where why certain like say slave owners, in the South and everything would also the slave trade happen, where they would take people from Africa, use Asian or native people for doing the really harsh work, especially in swamps or in mines or anything like that. Had that and it was usually some of the white slavers, that were more related to some of the either not necessarily just related to, but more akin to some of the reptilian overlords and Orion lords that have the extreme white skin. This is where you get the Nazi mentality too, from the white reptilian and the white
Yep.
skin. But yeah, this is seeing all other races as inferior. I find that interesting that they made them that bluish purplish color in it, and it's kind of like the reverse. They're seeing everybody else's.
Yeah, that's kind of the last big topic we have for Morrowind, but it's interesting to see because in Morrowind the issue of slavery is very heavily seen, but you can't do anything about it. It's one of those things that's too ingrained in the culture, and like you can try to like get about it, but it really just causes you bad luck if you try to in the game. Like you'll never be able to get rid of it in the game, but you can like fight against it, but it usually just causes you more problems than anything else.
Oh, like with some of the political leaders, all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never really played through completely Morrowind. I did diddle around with it at one point, but the one I really got involved with was Oblivion and Skyrim.
I'm looking forward to doing those ones, and then the Elder Scrolls Online after them.
Yeah,
so, I don't know if there's any beings that want to come through right now and talk about anything, but
I can actually feel the presence of several of them. I'm trying to see if I can actually see who is actually here. I sensed some like elven, like Tuathan groups that were around before when we were talking about them, like when we were back talking about the splitting off the families and all this other stuff, and the tribunal and everything. I'm seeing like an elven type of race around. That would be like Tuathan or whoever you are, you're extremely high vibrational. Okay, let's see. Don't think I met you. He looks like, if I had to say, a mix between a Dunmer and a Dunmer and a Hyle. Kind of, but doesn't have the purplish skin. But there is another one around that has a teal colored skin color, or purplish teal. And I've encountered that particular race before as well.
Some of the Dunmer go down to having like almost gray skin too, so that makes sense.
Yeah, now this guy is tealish gray, purple. Like if he moves his neck a little bit, I can see like a purpley, kind of like the side of the skull here.
Yeah,
kind of like that. And so let's see here. I don't recognize you two. Who are you? Actually, I'll go through the identification routine here. True Benevolent Source Creator, True Benevolent Earth Mother, and the True Benevolent Verses, please audit these particular set of beings as of this moment in time. Audit and delete codes where necessary, if that is possible. And all of you, do you accept this audit from True Benevolent Source Creator? Yes, you all do. All right. Interesting. I can feel even my skin moving. When they're around. They're a different group. They're a group that's working together. I'm seeing regular-looking elves with what appear to be like dark elves. So
sort of like a descendant lineage or like friend group, they're connected in their ancient past someplace.
Yeah, they're connected in their ancient past, but they look like they're working together. This may be because I'm on the West Coast, and these could be Lemurian descendants.
Mm-hmm.
You are correct, they're saying. Okay, they came from ancient Lemuria. And they're saying, ironically enough, ancient Lemuria had a very large volcano, one of the largest in the world. That part of that peak still pokes through the ocean in the Hawaiian Islands. And also it's considered the Ring of Fire, also associated with volcanoes. So I've never really heard from the Elven group descendants that actually came from Lemuria. It's usually the forest people, sometimes the darker Syrian Elven type groups, or there's also native Lemurian type of groups. So yeah, I find that interesting. So friends, which one of you wishes to speak? Oh, the one that's towards the front. Okay. Okay, let's see here. All right, friends. What is your name? One towards the front. Yes, you. You look. He's extremely elaborately dressed, like a necklace here, like crystals, and up around the neck and the back of the head. Some of them also have slight elongated skulls as well. You wouldn't be an interdimensional group, would you? Or mixed group? the ones that we were talking about that were um, anti nuclear power and toplet power. You're part of that group. Okay. Okay, that actually makes sense. How why you would be here? No dark Syrians among you or anything like that. No, or dark Orions, but I can see slight elongation to the skull. So there is a common lineage there between the darker and the lighter ones. So, okay, friend, what is your name? You're the one that's you've chosen to be the spokesperson. Um, is okay. Your name? Okay, I'm gonna have to write that one down. Give me a minute. That's a long one.
Oh,
Okay. All right. I'll have to abbreviate that. Let's see. Uh, uh, okay. Okay. He calls himself Anali Uman. What's the rest of it? Tanal. Amali Numan Tanal is what he's calling himself.
hmm.
And you're what would be considered to be an elf? Yes. What we would consider to be an elf. And who's your friend here? Yes, you, the dark elf. Let's. Yes, you. Okay, you're a jokester. It looks like. Okay, let's see. He has like a beard too. He has like this goatee like mine that comes down. He looks like he has human codes in him too, a little bit. Kind of. Uh, I mean, he's creepy, Isaac. Okay, let me see. Um, uh, okay, let's see. What's your name, friend? The darker elf. Okay. He calls himself Marnara. Marnara. Okay. Now it's a dark elf. Okay. All right. And you all are descendant lineage from Lemuria. Correct. All right. Uh, all right. Which would be almost considered like Morrowind in a way. Yeah. So you want to speak, Anali Uman Tanal? That's a mouthful right there. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Which name you want to choose to maybe abbreviate that a little bit? Mm, you'll just go with Uman. Oh, because you don't want Isaac making fun of Anali because that's too much like anal. Okay, yeah, okay. Let's see. All right. Doesn't give him any fodder, so you figure you'll diffuse that now. Okay. Let's.
Well, he's on top of keeping Isaac at bay.
Yeah, he's automatically knows how Isaac is going to react to different names, so he's just gonna go. He's just diffusing it. He's thought about it already. So it's like, okay, Uman, we'll go with that. All right. Can you channel through the crystal here, please? Absolutely. All right. Absolutely. Man, this group is strong. They are all over the place out here.
There's like a ton of physical, like there's a ton of them there.
Yes, they're actually here. So, and you said you do have a limited time in which you can actually accomplish that because of AI presence and everything. Because you're actually at war with another faction. Yes. Okay. Right. Let's see. Yeah, I can definitely feel them. Okay. Uman. All right. If you are for my highest good, you may speak through me, but through the crystal. Yes, of course. Ooh. It is intriguing the histories that you have actually mentioned here, because I'm going to tell a little bit of a tale about what was loosely talked about in a previous episode that you actually did on this game series. What dear Isaac mentioned in a previous episode about the two worlds that are very much like how Tamriel is in your game series. I will not tell where this planet is, or these two planets are, but I will tell you that it is exactly as you know the Elder Scroll to be. Our origin, in some respect, actually stems from the histories of those two worlds. We are actually a descendant lineage from those two worlds, and our ancestors were the ones that were actually created by Orion Lords, as you put it, to be. They created us in their image and expected us to actually serve them unconditionally. In this, we actually revolted against them in your earthly histories. You would know it as the Tuatha De Danann versus the Fomorian, or from Orion, you see. We contain a bulk of their codes, but none of their, as you would say, arrogant tendencies or domineering tendencies. Those codes can actually shift and become more leadership role oriented, let's just say. The dark elves and ourselves also lived on Maldek. As you know of in your Norse mythology, the dark elves played a large role. So did certain Syrian tribes. They were often mistaken for one another because of similarity in skin coloring. The Syrian groupings, there are a variant of tribes that are a mix either of dark and light tendencies, or, as you would say, more angelic tendencies, or more trickster tendencies, very much like your Loki in your Scandinavian mythology. He was one of these. You would have known him as Abendagoth, but dear Abendagoth is no longer amongst us for the reasons aforementioned. These are the tribes that we are currently at war with, not the good ones. The good ones actually stand with us, and we are linked with an interdimensional set of races, kind of like United Nations, that help rid your world of both nuclear and toplet technologies. Not all the toplet technologies are gone. Your current United States government is in the process of trying to enhance nuclear capabilities with toplet AI capabilities. These are things that cannot stand because, for one, you have two completely different power sources that have the ability to wipe out entire dimensions, dimensional pockets, and layers. Also, they have the ability to crack into void space and also create an entire omniversal setting based on their dark agenda. This is something that cannot be allowed. But I will also describe to you the setting we know in our history from those other two worlds. The way your politics and everything are set up in those game sequences, and also the mythology that is set up in those game sequences, are exactly the same, just differentiation in names and places and times to that of the game series. I will use an example. The way that the planets were created and everything was created by the void or within the void. That actually did take place, and some planets were actually brought forth from other universes. Further on in history, the division between the Aedra and Daedra, for instance, ones that take part in creation and ones that meddle in the affairs of humans. This is actually more like your angels and demons, but also the philosophy within your cultural group created by the Orion Lords. But on that planet, there were indeed beings that felt meddling in the affairs of the physical beings actually aided them, and there was a non-interference directive put in place by those that thought they were of the light. In this, both groups ended up meddling in the affairs either through non-action or through too much action, very much like in your human culture here. This resulted in a variant of politics, magical constructs, kingdoms, and empires. Also, variations of people arose, very much like your Boethia ended up creating the orc people in this respect. There were transmutations and trans configurations of different races that had existed there that were also transformed by different plagues, let's just say, into other variations of beings, very much like the beings that you have described. The beings that were there, however, had a variation of our DNA and what you would know of as human, but it was actually a proto race to the human race you know today. They existed prior to that of the invasions to that of your solar system here currently. You are actually the descendants of colonists that actually visited this solar system and seeded this planetoid. Also, the Asgardian kingdom, as you know them to be, are also travelers from distant stars. This is something that is not necessarily well known. A lot of species came here seeking refuge from the Orion invasions. However, there are some things that are not so well known, you see. Even though 500,000 years ago this system was conquered by them, what happened before? They stretched across space and time using the nexus point that exists in this solar system, then going back through time and attempting to rewrite history in their image. In some instances, you see, they were the very invasion force then ended up creating beings such as ourselves and our descendant lineages that eventually would conquer them. You see, they became part of an unending cycle that then ended their entire creation. This was what Source Creator had for them all along, you see, when they broke through time and space. When they came into being oppressing people, you see, it aided in people's evolution and the creation of different races that would not have been there had they not had not. This is very similar to the creation story, whereas the old gods became entrenched in their own creation. This happened in more spots in your galaxy than you have fingers and toes, and in your multiverse. But the two worlds that I actually speak of, one was more like a neighboring planet, like you have Mars and you have Earth. It is very similar to that. One has an Earth-like appearance, and the other one has more of a purple-red-like appearance. One is smaller than the other, very much like how Earth and Mars are. And they have a similar orbital relationship. The kingdoms that existed on these two worlds were that of what looked like myself, high elves, and human-looking races, and variations of what you consider to be dark elves. But very much like your story, they weren't always that way before, you see. There was an adaptational change when they came into this solar system, and their skin turned into that dark appearance or purplish teal-like color. In some cases, they got orange eyes, and other ones, they got more of a red pigmentation. But I digress. Back on that world, they had a similar appearance to ourselves with more of a Caucasian or, as you would say, mulatto type appearance. And the humans that were there were actually taller, much taller than the ones that you currently have. They were in excess of 7 or 8 feet tall. And in some cases, they actually spawned giants that were much larger. This is where some of your myths about giants being the spawn of angels and humans, that was another variation of giant and, as you would say, worker bee or builder race. But the ones that were on our world were between 7 and 8 feet to 10 feet tall. Elves were actually shorter than that of those giants. Now to the world itself. The architecture that most befits what that world actually contained were that of some of your Mesoamerican cultures and a mixture between that and some of your medieval European architecture. Also, when we came here to Earth, along with some of the other races that came, also not necessarily us, but they came from the Pleiades. They introduced that particular pyramidal architecture into your society as well, as did the Dir Antiqua. The ones that bastardized this were the Orions that used them for energy collection and transmission. The culture on Lemuria, where some of my people ended up, the descendant lineage, where we were members of the council therein, along with some of the Anakim, along with some of the ancient Mayan, as you would call them, and other variant races. some cat people, as you would know them to be, and or Lyrans, as you would know them to be, and some other Syrian variations that also contain some of our genetic coding. It was the Syrians that actually took control of the island country after a while and created what you know of as the kingship, or some of your original king lines, along with the tutelage of the Orion lords at the time. When the continent fell and parts of it lifted off and away, some of those Syrian royalty survived, along with the original Orion manipulators that existed behind them at all times. You would call them angels in this, and they were worshipped even by those particular Syrian servant royalty. On our world, to compare, even though I am a descendant, I still know some of the ancestral line, very much like the Anakam are to the forest people. They look very much like myself. You would see them as a high elf in your Elder Scrolls. You would see them as dressing in elaborate armor and jewelry, very much like some of your angelic pictures adapted. But the Orions also took on the same type of visage and used it to gain worship, to make themselves look pretty, let's just say. This is why some of them are called the pretty boys, as he has said, and variant other versions of more expletive language, let's just say. In our myth and lore, the main kingdom that existed on those two worlds was actually a concentric ring type pyramidal Mayan-like structure, say a step pyramid with concentric rings, very much reminiscent of your ancient Atlantis, which also included some of our people and those technologies. The centrus of the city was also very much like your imperial city is in your Cyrodiil, in your Elder Scrolls mythos, with the concentric rings, and had a tower, like I said, that was actually like a ziggurat or a pyramid. This was actually the centrus of power for that solar system. These two planets still exist, and if I were to identify the solar system in which it exists in, it would fall under Orion's siege, not only from your current day, but a time fracture that is actually not too far, not only from your location, but their location. It connects to both points. But the 2 points have been atrophied, let's say, and even the utterance of the solar system there from this one could activate that particular quantum pathway, let's just say. That solar system has been free from Orion influence for many, many generations now, and it will remain as such. As far as I know, the government there is very similar to as it was then, very much like in your Elder Scrolls series, where certain technological and political evolution happens very slowly, but it is very similar to your earthly environment. It is as such there. If humans were to visit these two worlds, which both have the concentric ring cities on them, they would see not only variations of their own culture, but they would see the sword and sorcery type of environment that is very coveted in your culture. There are even dragons that live on that planet, representations of the Khazad-Thul and also other cat races that exist on that planet. And those two planets, you see. One is more populated than the other. One is more of an outpost, while the other one is the main city. And it is in a dual sun system. The other sun is a smaller, almost non-existent star, while the other one is very much like your own sun, a yellow sun. And the cultures that exist there are the variations that you see within your Elder Scrolls, with some differences therein. For example, we have our high elves, like what you would see in front of you. You also have variations of dark elves and human codes. You also have some variations of lizard-type people, and the ones you mentioned last time that were created by the Orions. We also have other species and descendant lineages that are in refuge there. very much like your Lyrans, and variations of cat people, variations of lizards, variations of humans, and Viking looking people along with African American looking individuals. We also have some also native type people that actually went with us out into that particular solar system at that time that also inhabited that world. We also have a variant of some frog species that live there that are very much like your Ligurian people and a mix of the darker ones that were aforementioned. There are also variations of plant-like races that exist there, and also variations of dwarven-like people that exist there. Any variation you have seen within those games do exist on those two worlds. As I said, the second world is far less populated and is more of an outpost. They do mostly farming on that outpost, and there are minerals and mines that exist on that particular planet. The size of the very first planet is roughly slightly larger than your Earth, and the other planet is only slightly larger than your Mars by only a small fraction. But there are a vast number of people that exist underground and above ground on those two planets. The other one has been mined for centuries of a mineral that people on your world have never heard of. It is a red variation type of jewel, very much like your Amulet of Kings appears, or like a ruby. These particular gems help and aid with the technology that we create in our world, creating shields, creating weaponry, and creating other farming implements and shield technologies. It is actually quite an illustrious planet from what I've seen. I myself actually was there a couple of times, but we had to travel further out into space and come around it from a different angle altogether. It takes a lot longer if you cannot travel through a portal or a wormhole directly to it, but we had to go around the long way for the aforementioned reasons because of a fracture. There is also a superhighway of a portal that lives next to your solar system. This is another way to get to it, but it is currently closed at this point in time to anyone wishing to use it to exit the system and exit out into the galaxy. But we are free to leave and go wherever we wish the long way. At this point, if you wish to ask us questions, you may do so.
Well, thank you first for coming to enlighten us about the histories. And my first major question that we can go into is, do you believe there will be a time when Earth humans will be able to visit these planets without like destroying their culture?
Yes, of course, we do believe there will be a time that that will take place. We do believe that in time there will be human and human descent lineages living on those worlds. As it stands, but before this time fracture is actually closed, that is not necessarily a possibility because the humans that have the spacefaring technology would actually be more of a conquering nature versus that of more of a peace and loving and unity type nature. It's not like we have not had those tendencies in our own culture, but we have to actually be more protectant of ourselves in that way. But know that there are humans and human lineages already there. And then people will see cousin lines basically to their own lineages here on the earth. But I am confident that that particular portal system will eventually be reopened. You would call it the Bifrost in Norse mythology, and be reopened to that of those worlds. And I actually am in full confidence of this. Yes.
Okay. And do your people that are here, are you currently residing in Inner Earth, or where do your people here live?
Yes, we do exist in your inner earth, parts of your state of Arizona, Wyoming, parts of New Mexico, sharing space with you call them the Zeta Grays or the Zetas or Ebens. We exist in parts of California, aside from some of the dark Syrian groups and forest people groups. But we have now a main, as you would say, capital under what you know of as Mount Adams.
Okay. Thank you for coming in. If you have anything else to say, you may go ahead.
This type of disclosure is actually very appreciative to us in comparison to our own histories because of the fact that not only have we aided in putting some of these little points in your histories through telepathic channeling, let's just say, and ideas and idea creation through your creative chakras and inputs of energy, that is, but we appreciate the comparison to our own histories through this particular medium because we can only put so much disclosure together like this in one place. If we do the entire array as you people are doing here, we would end up denigrating our own positions. But all of you comparing it as such in this particular way, it has very little influence from us, you see. We've wanted this, but it's very little influence from us. These are ideas that your people have come up with and spurned from and spin from the different histories and comparing them as such to actual galactic history. Granted, as we have said, we've wanted this particular thing to happen, but we are not overall influencing this particular thing to happen. Humans are coming up with some of this on their very own, and the comparison as such. And other groups are also wanting their time in the sun, let's just say, variations of which may have agendas that do not align with your own and some that do. But just know that if people are wondering if we brought this whole concept of comparison into creation, we did not. That was a human inspiration. We just merely channeled the ideas into people's heads so that they would use their creative spark to add them into these particular game series. This is what we came in to say today. We rarely speak to that of humankind except through idioms and ideas and different spurts and different collections of concepts because of the fact that our particular frequency does indeed get attention from the ones that currently oppress you. So I end this whole conversation with this. This is a blessing from our culture to yours, my heart space to your own heart spaces, our minds to your ideas then enrich us, our ideas enrich you. We are all one, we are all in unity. Thank you. He was kind of in a hurry to dislodge there, but yeah, that he's at a high frequency though. He has like a very fast vibrational frequency. You can tell it's almost like your skin wants to vibrate. You don't get just goosebumps. It's like this chill that moves.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that because when he was talking, my like eyes were like vibrating. Almost like in their socket. It was weird. I could like feel.
Oh yeah, where they do this, yeah, they move like that a little bit or move.
Yeah, they kept doing it while he was talking.
Yeah, because you were getting the edge of the edge of his vibration like that. But my skin, I get a mix of like goosebumps, not full on goosebumps, but it's like just on the verge of getting goosebumps, and then the eyes move, and you can feel the vibration. I know they wanted me to have silver around me today, along with this crystal. Like I have this silver coin sitting here. They want, and my ring is silver. They were real big on me wearing silver. I know that. That's how they're transmitting it to me, is that they like things that are magnetic and things that are silver. And their jewelry is like that too. I can see a lot of them. Oh, you have to leave now. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, I liked that. Okay, let's see. Yeah, thank you, Isaac. He goes, yes, Anal Man can come back anytime. Yes, okay, yeah, thank you. It's Nali Uman Tanal was his name, and Marnara is was the dark elf. That was his friend. So
Mhm.
But yeah, that I thought that was very interesting. There, I've encountered the group that they interact with before in the other dimensional pocket, the ones that try to oppose nuclear technology and everything. I've run into them before in people's sessions. They wanted to get it out there that they don't want nuclear technology or toplet technology to exist. So that was actually very interesting. But I believe that we can conclude this episode now. If there's anything else you want to add, Ryan?
I just again, this is all about letting people know that like we have the information and they let it out, but we need to like we don't know that we're seeing it when we're seeing it because that's how it's presented to us. So you're probably seeing disclosure every day, but don't realize it. And if you start looking into certain things, though, you'll see these commonalities that will lead us back to all of the galactic and elemental history that we have on this planet, and it scares these negative factions that we're starting to notice it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. It scares them. They have to, like the cabal, them have to let the information out because that's how the magic works. But they don't
Mhm.
want anybody comparing it because
Mhm.
compare it, unite it. They put the puzzle together, and then they have more power than them. So yeah, that's basically what Uman was saying. Was they were appreciative that we are putting it all together in one place.
Mhm.
You see this on other shows too, but like Ancient Aliens and all that, where they compare different cultures, but it's never really been completely done for the video game world.
Yeah.
So I feel this is an extremely good thing. So thank you everyone for watching this. I know this we nerded out on you here yet again. But,
Yeah, this one was a bit longer, guys. Sorry.
yeah, it's a bit longer, guys, but it was well worth with it here in the end. So thank you everybody. Bye bye.
Bye. Have a good one.